to think you were so fresh and new to the game with so much talent. Oh my God.
Which is probably why I never performed, because like the idea of people like judging it just made me cringe. All my poems ain't for everybody. And you get to a space where you're like, but this poem was for me.
I'm taking notes because I actually have a lot of stage fright. A lot of people don't know that about me. I just be faking it like I don't have it. So can you tell us the story behind the name, the Shootah?
Yes.
Welcome everyone to episode 4 of Poetside Chats. We got the honorable, the incredible, the phenomenal LeChell, the Shootah, RH. If you've been on my channel for a minute, you've seen my reactions, and I've reacted to quite a few of her poems, all of them bangers. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I can't complain. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to hear that. I got to introduce you. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, LeChell Rush Honorat, also known as the Shootah, is a multidisciplinary artist creating written, visual, and spoken experiences centered in the Black queer feminine experience, motherhood, and mental health advocacy. LeChell is a 2-time Women of the World Poetry Slam finalist, ranking 3rd in the world for the 2021 competition, and a finalist in the inaugural Stonewall International Poetry Slam, as well as a Watering Hole Fellow. She is author of the collection 'Cause Therapy Ain't for Black Folks from Quest Press and the self-published collection Jaywalking. Her work can be found on Right About Now and Button Poetry. LeChell is a graduate of Southern University and A&M College with a bachelor's in science in civil engineering and holds an MBA from Texas Women's University. She currently lives in Houston, Texas. It is an honor to have you. It's an honor to have you. I don't know how else to say it. Like, I've been so excited for this moment. I was kind of nervous DMing you, and I don't know why, but...
I don't know why either. You know me.
Yeah. It's just, I look up to you so much, and it's not just me. It's poets all over Houston and elsewhere. Like,
oh man, thank you.
You inspire many. Like, I have conversations about you, and it's all positive things.
What? Oh, that's crazy. That's super crazy. It's always wild hearing that, because like, I'm like, I still feel super, super new. So like, when I hear people say that, I'm just like, how? But thank you.
Today, we're going to be discussing the ability to thrive in slam poetry and LeChell's experience in slam, how she came into it and all that, and any advice she might be able to give you all. So stay tuned for all of that. For those of you who are unfamiliar with slam poetry and even spoken word, I'm going to give you a brief description. So spoken word poetry is poetry that is performed. So as opposed to being written on the page, it is performed out loud, typically in front of an audience. Slam poetry is when you use that poetry to compete against other competitors. LeChell, what got you into poetry and what got you into slam poetry?
So I was one of those little kids in like Brooklyn, New York, who wanted to be a rapper. So I was like writing. I've been writing for a minute, thinking I had bars. I didn't back then, but I was trying. But naturally, I just kept writing. It's also been like a coping mechanism type of thing. So I'm always consistently writing. And I guess that just transformed its way into its own form of poetry. In terms of slam though, I stumbled into slam. Like, it was not something I had any aspirations to do. I just happened to show up at Right About Now. Like, this is late 2019, right before the pandemic. Yeah, so like the first time I got up there and performed, I was trash. Ebony Stewart was hosting, and Ebony was like, in the most loving but shady way, told me that I was bad. But she was like, come back, try again. And I came back, and it just so happened the next week was a slam. And I did 2 poems, and somehow I placed like top 3. I can't remember if I won or if I was third. I don't remember. But after that, they were just like, oh, you should keep coming back and try to do the qualifier for Women of the World. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I'll come. I'm out here trying to be brave. So sure, let me go get my my little Courage the Cowardly Dog on. Yeah. And I just showed up, and somehow I ended up winning the qualifier, being at WOWPS 2 months later and being a finalist, and I just haven't looked back since. So completely accidental. But I've been enjoying it so far.
Yo, I feel like I have a memory of that qualifier actually. Was it at Pass It On with Outspoken Bean, or was that something else I saw you perform at?
So I like Pass It On was literally like maybe the second time I had performed. Like, Bean had met me, saw me do a poem or 2. He's like, you should come out. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. So I had just like started trying out performing. But I did Houston VIP's qualifier, which was with Outspoken being at Pass It On. And then I did Right About Now. So they were like back to back. And I won them both. So I ended up being a Woman of the World Poetry Slam representing Right About Now because, you know, they paid for me to go. So it just made more sense.
Yo.
Yeah.
That is incredible. To think you were so fresh and new to the game with so much talent. Oh my God.
Bro, I still be surprised. I'm like, every time people talk to me like I'm super experienced, I'm like, y'all know I've only competed in 2 actual like national slams, and that was Woman of the World. I've done a couple of times now, and the Stonewall, when the first Stonewall. So I've only done 2 national poetry slams. I'm like, I'm fresh, y'all. I'm still pretty green, but you know, I'm here.
Okay, I need to get my game up because I started around the same time you did, actually, 2019. You know what I mean? But like, yeah. I'm just going to be honest with you. You're leagues and leagues beyond me in terms of skill. I know you're going to try to downplay it. Don't. I'm going to stop you. Like, you're very inspiring. Thank you so much. My next question for you is, does the idea of your poems being scored and judged in slams ever affect how you appreciate your work?
You know, sometimes like it's give and take, right? Before it was really bad, which is probably why I never performed, because like the idea of people like judging it just made me cringe. Because I'm like, I'm not writing these poems for y'all anyway, so why y'all get to judge them? You know, so it just made me cringe. I think now that I've done it for a little bit, I've taken a couple L's, you kind of learn to roll with the punches and like realize that like all my poems ain't for everybody. And you get to a space where you're like, but this poem was for me, right? So like I enjoy my poem, I needed this poem. And it's just like any writing, any art, it's like some people gonna appreciate it, some people won't. I don't think people can deny the quality of it, you know, like I can read a book and be like, oh, the writer is good, I just don't like it, you know? Yeah. So I'm kind of taking it with that kind of stride, like, hey, I don't think I'm bad, they just might not like me, and that's okay. I'm not for everybody. So I've gotten better at it. But I ain't gonna lie, every now and then when I take a L, my feelings be hurt and then I gotta rebound after the fact. But yeah, I'm doing better with it. But some days is better than others. Yeah.
And when it comes to practicing for slams and preparing for it, what kind of regimen do you have?
Ooh, so people are not going to believe this. I'm super awkward, right? Like I don't actually enjoy being on stage consistently, right? Like it's just not my space. Every now and then I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do it, but I'm not good at it. I get really anxious. So like my idea of practicing is like literally just me by myself in a mirror type of thing. Because like I've done it like with other people and I always feel super weird because they're like, oh, look at me, look me in my eye. And I'm like, why? That's weird. Like, do you really need to look at you type of thing? So leading up to most competitions, it's usually just me by myself in a mirror, running the poems. I might put music on just as like a distraction because I've done like Italians when I practiced once with Ebony Stewart and Safia Right About Now, the first year that I qualified, where they had somebody else reciting a poem as I'm reciting a poem just to make sure I knew it. So I'll like throw music on that I really like just to make sure I don't sing the song and I get the poem out. Because we know slams, sometimes distractions happen. So those are like the things that I might do by myself. And then like when I'm actually at the competition, I might pull somebody aside and be like, hey, I'm feeling kind of anxious. Do you mind if I just run this poem by you really quickly just so I can get it out, get situated with it one more time before I perform? And that's pretty much it. I'm more of like a dolo, let me be myself and my awkwardness kind of person until the very last minute. And I'm like, all right, I just need somebody to sit with me and make sure I got it. And that's it. Yeah. So that's how I kind of practice and lead up to it. Yeah.
Huh. All right. I'm taking notes because I actually have a lot of stage fright. A lot of people don't know that about me. I just be faking it like I don't have it. But honestly, my blood pressure is skyrocketing, my heart rate going up. Like I'm sweating, my palms all wet and stuff. Like it really gets to me, you know?
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I'll take notes on that. Like, for real, I might incorporate that. Can you talk about your journey through Women of the World? You competed 2 times, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So can you talk about, you know, your journey preparing for it and actually competing?
Yeah, so the first time, so my first and second time competing were completely different experiences. So like I said, the first time I went on a Right About Now doc, right, on their docket as their representative after I won the Woman of the World Poetry Slam. And right about now does this thing where they'll get like an Airbnb and they'll have like the whole community and the house with the poet. So you're just really supported, really surrounded by a lot of community. I definitely needed that. It was my first slam, and I just happened to have like Eris Keon, who was there with me, who you also did a reaction with, and I love her. She inspires me consistently. And Ruby was also competing that year. So the three of us were together. We got to really be in community with each other and fellowship with each other. I got to really be coached by Ebony Stewart, who had previously won Woman of the World Poetry Slam and has also been a large part in Right About Now as well. So I actually got to really get coached and really be around a lot of people for that first one. The second one, however, was really different because I wasn't sure if I was going to go. We were in the middle of a pandemic. So I was like, do I really want to take that risk? And I kind of decided at the last minute that I was going to go. But what made it really unique, though, is because I was by myself that time, I was forced to interact with other women for the first time. Like I couldn't just fall back on the Right About Now community. So the first year, I didn't really make a lot of friends. I didn't really meet a lot of people because I was just in my little bubble. The second year, I was forced to like kind of step out. And I think a lot of people just saw me by myself and they spoke to me. Like the women are amazing. So people just actually spoke to me. So I actually got to, find community within some more poets outside of Right About Now who are now like my best friends ever. So really two different experiences. One really rooted in community to prep, and then the second one really getting by myself and learning how to prep. And I think I definitely needed the individual experience because I really struggled with knowing how to pick poems and what to do and when to pick the poem and do the poem. So it was the first time that it challenged me to be like, do the poem that feels good, do that, right? So it was two completely different experiences, two completely different preparations, but both of them really added value where I'm like, okay, now how can I mesh the two together? Because I really enjoyed both of them a lot.
I'm getting enriched right now, and I know the audience will as well. I haven't really competed in that many slams myself, and definitely I don't think any on the caliber of Women of the World. I guess with the exception of maybe Cupsy, I don't know.
Cupsy had to be intense. I've seen some of those. I've never done team slams, so I'm always super impressed by those team slams. So don't minimize it. That's major.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Y'all finished fifth that year? Like y'all were like top 5, top 4?
Yeah, fourth. We got fourth.
Hey, come on. You better take that title.
Appreciate it. Thank you. What is it like juggling responsibilities such as, family and parenthood with like pursuing poetry as a career?
Yeah. So for me, it's challenging, but a little bit easy at the same time, specifically because I'm one of the poets who has very clearly stated, like, I'm not going to be a full-time artist. Like, that's just not my ministry. It's not my testimony at all. The idea of traveling consistently, as I mentioned, like, I am not one who does well completely on stage. Like, I still get really anxious, stage fright. I know it looks like it, like the confidence level look like it's on 1,000 when I'm performing, but the lead up to that is really difficult for me. So I had decided early on that like, this is not something I could potentially do full time. So because I knew that, it was just like, hey, what makes sense, right? Like I just take the opportunities that make sense for me or that I feel like are going to be fun for me. Like Women of the World is just a really enjoyable experience for me. So I go. When I'm picking features, it's like, hey, I got a full-time job. Not to be like, sedity about it, but also, does it make sense to take off of work for this performance, right? Like if it doesn't, I don't know if I can realistically do it because I do have a full-time job and I don't like the idea of like potentially struggling through my artistry. Like I recognize that I am very privileged in the fact that I get to do art because I genuinely love it and not because I need to survive. And I like the idea of that, right? Because like my art is for me first, and whoever likes it, they could come along for the ride. I enjoy that. I just don't feel like I could do art the same if I had to survive off of my art. I prioritize like my family and the fact that I need my full-time job to take care of my family. So those things come first. And then my art is like embedded around that and works around that in terms of how I need to take care of myself and just what opportunities feels good for me that I can really enjoy. So it's hard because I still got to balance it, and I still do want to do my art and all of that. Like I enjoy it so much. I just cannot possibly not do it. But it's still easy because I know, like, hey, if push comes to shove, these are the things that have to come first. And then, you know, we do whatever else we need to and can do within that time.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. I have the same philosophy, honestly. You know, like,
yeah,
I'm doing poetry. I'm going as hard as I can at it. You know, YouTube is paying me some, and I do performances every now and then. But like at the end of the day, I still have a separate job because, you know, I mean, maybe eventually my goal is actually to do poetry full time one day, you know?
Yeah.
But I do understand that, one, that's not everybody's goal. And then two, I can't just go all in and like just throw away all my responsibilities to, you know, my things like that. Yeah. So it's a tough thing to juggle. And obviously I don't have my own family yet. So I'm not saying we have the same situation whatsoever, but yeah, I do understand, you know, having to like find a good balancing act between your passion and your responsibilities, you know? Can you talk about some of the themes that exist in your poems?
Yeah, sure. So I am a Black queer identifying poet, woman poet. My pronouns are she, they, though. So, you know, it works out, whatever y'all need to do. So I really do like to center that experience a lot around my queer identity, specifically because, like, you know, I'm your typical kind of queer kid who kind of struggled with that, a lot of shame surrounded in that. And I really felt like that was the story that I wanted to tell, that I needed to tell, just because it wasn't something I really spoke of or even acknowledged for such a long time. So a lot of experiences centered around that, but also the intersectionality, which I know is super overused, of being a Black queer woman, right? Like, it's just so much, there's so much nuance and so much, you know, complexity and identifying and being at those three intersections of my life. So I really like to speak about those. But motherhood is also a really big one for me, especially because, like, I was a young mother. I gave birth when I was only 23 years old, fresh out of college. And people glorify it like it's just such a happy space. And don't get me wrong, I love being a mom. I love my daughter. But it's also not that great sometimes. Like the over romanticizing of it, just, it makes me sick. It's actually really hard. Like my own bouts of postpartum and juggling through that, and my body being different. I went from being this dual athlete to just like practically bedridden because you know, I was like pregnant. So I was just really struggling with that, and in general some other mental health issues. So those things will really pop up a lot in my work, like that journey of motherhood and saying the good and the bad about it. Speaking to my daughter, right? I write a lot of poems to my daughter. People might have actually seen my daughter perform a poem or two. if you've been around her, she's always at the show. So, you know, she's like attached to my hip, and even that's a thing for me. Knowing that like my identity is so intertwined with my motherhood, and trying to decouple that sometimes. So yeah, so I really play with that idea of like being a mom and breaking that down to the many levels that it exists at, and then intertwining that mental health advocacy that spreads across all of that, from motherhood, from being Black, from being a woman, from being queer, and all the ways in which those things intersect. So those are the themes that I like to play with most often. Yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing. And yeah, I've seen bits and pieces of all of that throughout the poems I've reacted to on the channel, and even poems that I've watched from you that I didn't react to. Who are some slam poets who've inspired you to become the wordsmith that you are today?
Whoa, so all of mine are really, really mostly recent, just because I haven't been in slam poetry super long, right? I didn't really start to even explore the idea of slam poetry until like 2018, early 2019. So me walking into the world of slam poetry is like really in that era of poets, and then the poets that I've been around. So of course, Ebony Stewart, who's like an OG throughout the Texas area. Like, you just can't help but know who Ebony Stewart is. When I first started diving into slam poetry, of course, I found B&B.
So I see people like a Jasmine Vans and Alicia Harris. When I saw those, and I ended up in a rabbit hole of Strivers Row. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So like those poets who are on that East Coast, Mahogany Brown, really enjoyed her. I know she doesn't like really slam that much, but she does a little something and hosts like some poetry slams and open mics, still back home in New York pretty consistently. And now when I'm watching people, Portia O, I love to study Portia O. She's just phenomenal. Crystal Valentine. As you can see, most of these are Black women. But if I'm thinking about men as well, I really enjoy watching Rudy, because Rudy just resonates with me, because he definitely gives me those like more vulnerable poems, which is definitely my kind of poem. Like, I'm not the super aggressive type of poet. So I really enjoy Rudy if I had to talk about men. And then the men around me, Zach Blunt, RJ Wright, who I know you've been coached by before, who's lyrical as hell. So I'm inspired by that younger generation who are now coincidentally all of my peers, which is super weird. Every now and then I fangirl and I'm like, oh my God, I used to watch you on YouTube. Because I like legit like studying poetry now. So yeah, those are kind of the people who I'm around, which is super weird because they're like now some of my close friends.
What advice would you give to the LeChell of 2018, early 2019 regarding her poetry career from that moment on?
Wow. What advice? Shoot. I would literally just tell myself again, just go for it. Like I spend so much time hesitating. Like there's so many things I still don't do just because I'm afraid of them. And also just because I'm afraid of what comes with that. Like Ebony Stewart has said it before, and I say it to myself all the time. Like sometimes I'm just scared of that power. Like, what does it mean if I like do really, really good at this? And it's just like, do that shit anyway. It like just do it, right? A part of me is like sad that I waited so long, because I'm like I wasn't in the generation of people who got to do the B&Bs and the cup C's. Like I aged out of that, right? Like the first time I hit the stage, I was already about to be 29, you know. So I'm super late to the game. So I would definitely like tell myself like, yo, go for it. The sooner the better. Just dive for it. Yeah.
Oh. All right, take notes, everybody. Take notes. This is wisdom right here. So, can you tell us the story behind the name, the Shootah?
Yeah. So, interesting thing. So, I told y'all, like, I had been going to WAN, but I would never perform. And I was probably at WAN like a solid 6 to 8 months before I actually hit the stage. Nobody knew that I was like writing or had poems or anything. But when I was there, what people also don't know is that I do photography. So I always got a camera with me. And I would literally be at the events taking pictures, and then I'll just post them, tag WAN. So before anybody knew me as a poet, they knew that I took pictures, right? Like Sophie and them knew I took pictures. And the first time I went to perform, as I said, Ebony Stewart was hosting, and I gave them like, hey, this is just LeChell, right? And as she's calling me up, she's like talking about, yo, we got this Black woman who be out here shooting on a picture, taking pictures, you know, show love to Black artists, Black poets, and all of this stuff. So give it up for the Shootah. So that's literally how she called me up to the stage, right? She just called me the Shootah because she had known I was taking pictures. And then it just stuck. You know, people like, when I like really got to know Ebony, everybody's like, if Ebony Stewart gives you a nickname, you keep it. And I'm like, okay, we gonna keep it. So it came from photography, but then as I like stepped into poetry, people were like, oh no, they really thought it was a poet thing because people like the poetry. They was like, oh, we see why they call you the Shootah. And I'm like, that's really not, but like, if y'all believe it, y'all believe it. You know, I'm not gonna tell you otherwise. But then people also thought that I played basketball. So now it's kind of like this triple entendre of like photographer, poet, basketball player. And it just fits every situation. So that's how I got the name. Just it found me from the OG and the poetry community, and it just stuck. And I'm glad that I've lived up to it in a way, you know, like that was the big thing after I got it. It's like, okay, now you got to link to the name. So I'm glad that I've been able to like step into it pretty comfortably now.
Yo, that's incredible. I don't think I've heard like an origin story quite like that when it comes to how someone received their like pen name, you know?
Yeah.
Wow. Ah, that's incredible. Okay, so you brought up basketball. Have you ever written a basketball poem before?
Yeah. You know, younger me definitely likes it. Every now and then I'll throw a basketball metaphor in there. But I'm much more likely to throw anime metaphors in my poem than basketball metaphors. But every now and then I'll slide it in. But those might be the poems that people don't see, because they're like, in my mind, I'm like, this is super corny. So this is just for me, and I'll keep it, you know, in a notebook somewhere. But yes, every now and then I will let a basketball, you know, reference pop out. I got a couple of poems that definitely has basketball references in it, so it works because people know I played basketball, so everybody's like, oh, you know. I think My Joy Like You Supposed To is the first one that I like actually performed that has a basketball reference in it. So yeah, I subtly slide it in there every now and then.
All right, so what advice would you give to anyone who's thinking about trying spoken word or competing in a slam?
Yeah, so read, because it definitely sharpens the pen, and then get on the stage, right? Get on the stage and find a tribe. I don't think I would be the slam poet, the spoken word poet, or the poet that I am in general, if it wasn't for the tribe that I found. Like, I've always been writing, but I was really writing in a silo, and I don't think I got better until I stepped out of it and got challenged by like the Eris Keons and started competing against people. And then it was like, oh, but they're so good, you just can't be mediocre, right? Like you kind of have to step your pen game up. So it's like, take those few couple of L's, you know, be okay with the fact that some of your old poems are going to suck. And then find that community to really help sharpen the pen, because it's needed, especially if you're going into the slam poet world. People out here trying to come for your neck. You know, this is their competition. This is their glory day, right? Their competition season. It's a sport for some of these poets. So you definitely want to get yourself out there and then find the tribe of people who will really make you sharpen your pen, so that every time you step on the stage, it's like, oh, I got to give my best, or I might as well just hold this L.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate. I remember writing poetry for I think I started writing poetry junior year of high school, something like that. But I didn't actually join a community until junior year of college. That was April 2019. And just the 2019 alone, I made more growth than I did like all the years prior to that in my poetry journey, simply because I plugged into a community. Like, you can do poetry alone, but it's always better with community because of the competitive fire that it puts under you, but also, you know, the inspiration, the motivation, the relationships that builds, all of that will bolster. And I'm sure you can also agree with that. Like, it'll your pen, it'll also bolster your confidence as well.
For sure. Especially if you have the right community, right? Because like, my community will gas me up. Like, even on my worst days, they're like, you can write better than that. Like, we know you. We're not even worried about it. You got it. And it was even more important for me because like, I have a completely technical background, right? I've never studied, you know, any type of written word or language. I'm an engineer by trade, you know? So like, I don't study poetry. So a lot of the way that I'm able to use these literary devices is because I've been in community with people who have MFAs, who have been writing for forever, who have been doing this for way longer than me. So similar to you, right? Like, October, I had nothing, and then they were like, oh, you're going to compete. And I just literally had to write a new poem every single week just so I had enough poems to be on stage and compete with these poets so I could make it to a WOWPS qualifier, right? So it was just like, I had to do it. I had to crank it out, and they had to be top tier every time. So it really challenged me in a way that definitely wouldn't have happened if I didn't step out there and be like, all right, we're going to try.
All right, so the time has come. What would you like to promote? I mean, promote any social media, any projects you have out, any products, past and present, you name it. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, so this is always great because I'm terrible at self-promotion. But I'm on everything, website, social media handles, everything is at by LeChell. BYLECHELL. Right now, I just released a new collection of poems called Jaywalking, which is around Black queer women experiences naturally. Just released that, so you can buy those. And my friends would kill me if I don't plug the fact that I just started doing merch. So like sweaters, shirts, and everything. I have those all on my website, LeChell.com. So I have that. But also, do you mind if I plug other people as well? Ebony Stewart just did a double release of Homegirlhood and Blood Fresh, which are phenomenal. Ariana Brown is like just about to drop a new Zine that she's putting out. I love Ariana Brown. Dang, like my friends just do dope stuff all the time. So if y'all ever get a chance, especially those two, because I know they had just dropped some new projects, and Ariana Brown's We Are Owned is another phenomenal collection that you can read. I'm waiting for Eris to drop something new. She did a chapbook a while ago, so I'm just waiting on her to drop something new so I can start plugging that. But yeah, like just on my website, I have a whole bunch of like other Black poets, photographers that y'all can support. So, but those are my top three when I think of Black women: Eris Kian, Ebony Stewart, and Ariana Brown.
Whew. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh my God, it is an honor. I'm sure my subscribers are very excited to see you in the thumbnail, just to get a chance to get to know you better. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having me.